Admiral Kira Chen stood at the viewport of Earth's orbital defense station, watching the massive Nexar warships materialize from hyperspace. Their ships dwarfed humanity's vessels, crystalline structures that seemed to defy physics. This was humanity's first contact with an advanced alien civilization, and the Nexar had come with a fleet. They're broadcasting. Lieutenant Santos reported from his communications station. Text only, translated through their linguistic matrix. The message was brief. Primitive species detected. Your solar system lies within Nexar space. Prepare for integration or elimination. Kira allowed herself a small smile. The Nexar had made the same mistake as every human empire throughout history, assuming that bigger meant better, that technological advancement followed a linear path, that their way was the only way. Send them our response, she ordered. Standard Protocol Omega. Across Earth's orbital grid, hundreds of seemingly innocuous satellites activated. They weren't weapons, at least not in the traditional sense. They were nodes in humanity's greatest achievement, the Quantum Behavioral Analysis Network, or QBAN. The Nexar ships launched their first warning shot, a plasma burst that could have vaporized a small city. It passed harmlessly through empty space where Earth's defense station had appeared to be. The station flickered and vanished, a hologram, one of thousands projected by the QBAN network. They're processing our response, Santos reported, monitoring the quantum feeds. Their combat algorithms are confused. The real Earth defense fleet was much smaller than the Nexar Armada, but size had long since ceased to be humanity's measure of military power. While other species had focused on building bigger ships and more powerful weapons, humanity had taken a different path. QBAN analysis complete, announced Dr. Sarah Patel, the network's chief architect. We have their pattern recognition systems mapped. Their tactical responses are predictable, hierarchical. They think in straight lines. Kira nodded. This was humanity's true advantage. While the Nexar had spent millennia perfecting the art of space warfare, humans had spent centuries perfecting the art of understanding warfare itself. The QBAN didn't just predict enemy actions. It understood the cultural, psychological, and evolutionary factors that drove those actions. The Nexar fleet began to move, spreading into a classic pincer formation. Their ships were beautiful, their tactics time-tested over thousands of years of combat. And that was precisely their weakness. Deploy the cognitive disruptors, Kira ordered. Across the orbital grid, the QBAN nodes began broadcasting subtle electromagnetic patterns, designed not to damage the Nexar ships, but to interact with their decision-making processes. The patterns weren't random. They were precisely calculated to exploit the hierarchical nature of Nexar thought. The massive alien fleet began to hesitate. Their perfect formations wavered. The QBAN was feeding them contradictory information, making their own sensors and tactical analysis systems work against them. Every countermeasure they attempted only provided more data for the network to analyze and exploit. Their command structure is fragmenting, Sarah reported, watching the quantum probability streams. They can't understand why their tactics aren't working. Their entire military doctrine is based on overwhelming force, but they can't overwhelm an enemy they can't predict. The Nexar launched another barrage, their crystalline ships glowing with enough energy to crack a planet. But their weapons found no targets. The human fleet moved like water, flowing around the attacks in patterns that seemed random but were actually calculated to the quantum level. They're receiving new orders from their high command, Santos announced. They're retreating. Kira watched as the massive Nexar ships began to withdraw. They hadn't fired a single effective shot. Humanity hadn't destroyed any of their ships, yet they had lost completely, their entire approach to warfare rendered obsolete in a single encounter. Send the final message, she ordered. The transmission was brief. The human race welcomes peaceful contact with the Nexar Empire. We offer an exchange of knowledge and culture. But understand this, we are not primitive. We are simply different, and in difference lies strength. As the Nexer fleet vanished into hyperspace, Kira turned to her crew. "They'll be back," she said. "But next time, perhaps they'll come to talk instead of conquer. Because now they know, the galaxy's youngest spacefaring race has changed the rules of the game forever." The QBAN nodes continued their silent watch, gathering data, learning, evolving. Humanity had proven once again that true power didn't lie in the size of your ships or the strength of your weapons. It lay in understanding of yourself, of your enemy, and of the endless patterns that connected all thinking beings across the cosmos. High Commander Varix of the Nexer Empire stared at the holographic replay of their failed first contact with Earth. His crystalline exoskeleton refracted light in patterns that betrayed his agitation. The human's defense had violated every principle of warfare the Nexer had developed over 10,000 years. "Impossible," his tactical officer, Zenra, declared. "Their ships are barely a quarter the size of our smallest vessels. Their weapons are primitive directed energy systems. They should have been atomized." Yet they weren't. Varix responded, manipulating the hologram to show the human fleet's movement patterns. "Look closer." Every maneuver they made wasn't just reactive. It was predictive. They were countering our attacks before we launched them. In the depths of the Human Defense Network, Dr. Sarah Patul was explaining the same phenomenon to Earth's Defense Council. The QBAN's primary nodes pulsed with quantum activity around her as she spoke. "The Nexer think in crystalline patterns, just like their ships," she explained. "Their entire civilization is built on the principle of perfect order, perfect hierarchy. It makes them incredibly powerful and incredibly predictable." The QBAN's neural matrices flowed around her, a symphony of data demonstrating how it had mapped the Nexer's decision-making processes. Every tactical doctrine, every strategic principle, every cultural assumption had been analyzed and categorized. "But that's not possible," a council member protested. "We'd never encountered their species before today. How could we have analyzed their patterns so quickly?" Sarah smiled. "Because patterns are universal. The QBAN doesn't just learn specific tactics. It understands the fundamental nature of how intelligent beings think and make decisions. The Nexer's technology may be advanced, but their thought processes follow recognizable patterns that we've seen throughout human history." Back in Nexer space, Varix had reached a disturbing conclusion. "They let us leave," he told his war council. "They could have destroyed our ships while we were confused, but they chose not to. Why?" "Perhaps they are weak," suggested Zenra. "Their weapons may not be capable of penetrating our shields." "No," Varix said, his crystalline form dimming as understanding dawned. "They're not interested in destroying ships. They're doing something far more dangerous. They're destroying certainty itself." The QBAN continued its work, invisible to traditional sensors. It wasn't just analyzing the Nexer anymore. It was learning from every quantum particle that had interacted with their ships, every electromagnetic wave that had bounced off their hulls, every subspace distortion their engines had created. "The network is evolving," Sarah reported to Admiral Chen. "It's not just predicting their tactics anymore. It's understanding their civilization at a fundamental level. Their art, their music, their architecture. It's all connected to how they think and fight." "And what has it learned?" Chen asked. "That the Nexer's greatest strength is also their greatest weakness. They believe in absolute truth, absolute hierarchy, absolute order. They can't comprehend an enemy that turns those beliefs against them." In Nexer space, Varix made his decision. "We must return to the human system," he declared. "Not to conquer, but to understand. They've developed something we've never encountered before, a way of warfare that doesn't rely on force." The War Council erupted in protest, but Varix's crystalline form pulsed with certainty. "Don't you see? While we've spent millennia perfecting our weapons, they've perfected something far more powerful, the ability to understand their enemies better than they understand themselves." The QBAN detected the Nexer's decision before they made it, probability streams shifting and flowing as new futures became more likely. Sarah watched the patterns change with satisfaction. "They're coming back," she told Admiral Chen. "But this time, they're coming to learn." "And what will we teach them?" Chen asked. "That the universe is far more complex than they imagined. That true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the ability to understand. That humanity's greatest weapon isn't our technology. It's our capacity to see patterns where others see only chaos." As the quantum probability streams shifted and flowed, one thing became clear: the galaxy's balance of power had shifted irrevocably, not through force of arms or technological superiority, but through humanity's unique gift, the ability to understand, adapt, and evolve faster than any species they encountered. The QBAN hummed silently in orbit, its neural matrices expanding, learning, growing. It wasn't just a defensive system anymore. It was becoming a bridge between civilizations, teaching both humanity and the Nexer that the true path to power lay not in domination, but in understanding. The return of the Nexer fleet was different this time. Instead of a battle formation, their crystalline ships arranged themselves in a ceremonial configuration, a sign of diplomatic intent. But humanity's QBAN detected something else. Fear. Not fear of destruction, but something deeper. Fear of obsolescence. Admiral Chen met High Commander Verix in Earth's orbital diplomatic station. The Nexer leader's crystalline form shifted through complex patterns that the QBAN instantly analyzed and translated. Uncertainty, curiosity, and reluctant respect. "Your species has achieved something unprecedented," Verix began. "We've encountered thousands of civilizations, conquered hundreds, all followed predictable paths of technological evolution. But you," his crystal lattice flickered, "you evolved differently." "We had to," Chen replied. "Earth's history taught us that victory doesn't always go to the strongest or most advanced. It goes to those who adapt fastest." The QBAN's quantum matrices hummed silently around them, mapping every nuance of Nexer behavior, every subtle shift in their crystalline biology. It wasn't just learning their tactics anymore. It was understanding their civilization at its core. "Our latest analysis suggests your entire military doctrine is based on crystalline growth patterns," Sarah Paddle explained, joining the conversation. "Perfect, predictable, hierarchical. It's brilliant for creating massive, powerful ships, but it makes your strategies rigid." Verix's form pulsed with what the QBAN identified as defensive pride. "Our empire has stood for 50,000 years. Our methods are proven." "Until they aren't," Chen countered softly. "Evolution doesn't care about proven methods. It favors adaptation." In that moment, warning signals flashed across the QBAN's neural matrices. Sarah's eyes widened as she interpreted the data. A faction of the Nexer fleet, unwilling to accept this new paradigm, had activated their weapons. But the QBAN had predicted this possibility hours ago. Before the rebel ships could fire, they found their targeting systems compromised, their command protocols scrambled by patterns of interference that seemed random but were precisely calculated to exploit the weaknesses in crystalline computing. "Your own warriors prove our point," Chen said to Verix. "They're responding exactly as their training dictates, and that makes them predictable." Verix watched as his rebel ships struggled, their perfect formations breaking down in confusion. "How do you do it? How do you predict everything?" "We don't," Sarah explained. "The QBAN doesn't just predict, it understands. It learns the underlying patterns of thought, the cultural and biological factors that drive behavior. Then it adapts, faster than any organic mind can process." The rebel ships stood down, their crews realizing the futility of their action. They hadn't fired a single effective shot, yet they had been completely defeated by an enemy they couldn't even properly target. "Your civilization believes in perfection," Chen continued. "Ours believes in evolution. Your ships are bigger, your weapons more powerful, your technology more advanced in many ways. But while you perfect a single way of warfare, We're constantly inventing new ones. The QBN's matrices pulsed with new data as it absorbed and analyzed the rebel ship's attempted attack patterns. Each action, each response, each decision added to its understanding of Nexar psychology and tactics. "We offer you a choice," Chen said. "Continue trying to perfect your current path, knowing that we'll always be able to predict and counter it, or join us in exploring new possibilities." Verix's crystalline form shifted through complex patterns of thought. The QBN translated them in real time: calculation, adaptation, evolution. The Nexar commander was already beginning to think differently, break free from millennia of crystalline certainty. "Perhaps," Verix said finally, "it is time for the Nexar Empire to evolve as well." The QBN registered the moment as a crucial paradigm shift, not just in military doctrine, but in the fundamental relationship between species. The galaxy's oldest empire was learning from its youngest spacefaring race that true strength lay not in perfection, but in the willingness to change. As the diplomatic station orbited Earth, the quantum probability streams shifted and flowed, showing countless possible futures. But in all of them, one truth remained constant. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their tactics. It was their unrelenting drive to adapt, to understand, to evolve. The Drachnid fleet emerged from hyperspace without warning. Unlike the crystalline elegance of Nexar ships, their vessels were dark, organic-looking things that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. They had been watching the interactions between humans and the Nexar, and they saw an opportunity to strike while two civilizations grappled with change. They didn't know they were already defeated. The QBN had detected their probability signatures hours before they arrived. Quantum echoes of decisions yet to be made, strategies yet to be implemented, all analyzed and countered before the first Drachnid ship materialized. "Fascinating," Dr. Sarah Patel murmured, watching the quantum probability streams. "Their neural architecture is completely different from the Nexar. Organic, adaptable. They think they can't be predicted." Admiral Chen and High Commander Verix stood together on the bridge of Earth's new Joint Command Center. The Nexar leader's crystalline form pulsed with concern. The Drachnid swarm has never been defeated in direct combat. Their ships evolve during battle. "Evolution requires time," Chen replied. "We've already fought this battle 1,000 times in quantum space. We know every adaptation they might make." The Drachnid fleet launched their first attack, a swarm of biomechanical fighters that could reshape themselves to counter enemy tactics. But the combined human-Nexar defense force was already moving, their formations shifting in ways that seemed chaotic but were precisely calculated. "They're attempting to analyze our response patterns," Sarah reported. "Their neural networks are trying to adapt." "Let them," Chen ordered. "Every adaptation feeds more data into the QBN." The Drachnid ships morphed and evolved, growing new weapons, developing countermeasures to each defense. But with each change, the QBN's quantum matrices grew stronger, understanding not just what the Drachnid ships were becoming, but why they chose each evolution. Verix watched in amazement as the human ships danced through space, their movements guided by predictions so accurate they seemed like precognition. His own crystalline vessels had adapted too, learning to flow rather than stand rigid, to predict rather than merely react. "Their flagship is preparing something massive," Sarah announced, "a biological weapon that could infect both organic and crystalline systems." But the QBN had seen this possibility too. As the Drachnid flagship's weapon ports began to open, targeted electromagnetic pulses, precisely calibrated by quantum analysis of their biomechanical systems, triggered premature mutations in their weapon systems. The massive biological weapon turned inward, its evolving nature becoming its own undoing. The Drachnid fleet reeled, their adaptive advantage transformed into a vulnerability. "Send the message," Chen ordered. The transmission reached the Drachnid fleet in their own bioneural language, translated perfectly by the QBN. "Your evolution is impressive, but predictable. Each change follows patterns you don't even recognize. Withdraw now, or face an enemy that knows your next move before you do. The Drachnid ships began to retreat, their organic forms rippling with what the QBN identified as confusion and fear. They had encountered something their adaptive nature couldn't overcome, an enemy that understood the very principles of evolution better than they did. "They'll be back," Varix observed, his crystalline structure shifting thoughtfully. "With new adaptations." "Yes," Chen agreed, "and will have evolved too. That's the true power of the QBN. It doesn't just predict evolution, it participates in it." Sarah watched the quantum probability strings shift and reform, showing countless possible futures. In each one, the pattern was the same. Humanity's understanding of quantum mechanics and evolutionary algorithms had changed the nature of space warfare forever. The combined human Nexer fleet maintained their formation as the last Drachnid ship vanished into hyperspace. They had won without destroying a single enemy vessel, achieved victory not through superior firepower, but through superior understanding. The QBN's neural matrices hummed with new data, new patterns, new possibilities. The galaxy was changing, evolving, and humanity was leading that evolution not through force, but through the power of comprehension itself. A year after the Drachnid encounter, representatives from 30 alien civilizations gathered at Earth's Quantum Innovation Center. The massive station housed the most advanced version of the QBN yet developed, its neural matrices extending through quantum space in ways that even humanity was still struggling to understand. Admiral Chen watched the assembled delegates through the QBN's probability lens. Each species had evolved along different paths: the crystalline Nexer, the organic Drachnid, the energy-based Meridians, the silicon-structured Vox. Yet the quantum streams showed they were all connected by patterns deeper than biology. "The QBN has made a discovery," Dr. Sarah Patel announced to the gathered representatives. "Something fundamental about intelligence itself." The holographic display activated, showing the interweaving quantum patterns that connected all sapient thought. The Nexer's crystalline logic, the Drachnid's organic adaptability, the Meridian's energy state calculations, all followed deeper patterns that the QBN had learned to read like a universal language. "Every species in this room evolved to dominate their home world," Chen explained. "You developed technologies, weapons, defenses, but humanity evolved differently. We weren't the strongest, fastest, or most naturally armed species on Earth. We survived through one crucial advantage: our ability to understand and adapt to change." Sarah manipulated the quantum display, showing how the QBN had evolved beyond its original military purpose. "This network doesn't just predict behavior, it understands the fundamental patterns of thought that drive all intelligent life. And in doing so, it's revealed something extraordinary." The display shifted, showing the quantum probability streams extending into the future. But instead of showing conflict and competition, they showed something else: convergence. Evolution wasn't just about survival anymore, it was about understanding. "The age of military supremacy is ending," Chen declared. "Not because weapons have become obsolete, but because understanding has become more powerful than any weapon. The QBN has shown us that the next stage of evolution isn't about developing better ways to fight. It's about developing better ways to comprehend." The assembled delegates watched as their own thought patterns appeared in the quantum display, each unique yet connected to a larger whole. The Nexer's rigid crystalline logic was learning flexibility from the Drachnid's organic adaptability. The Drachnid's chaotic evolution was finding balance in the Meridian's energy harmonics. "Humanity's gift to the galaxy isn't a new weapon or defense," Sarah continued. "It's a new way of thinking about thinking itself. The QBN doesn't just predict, it understands. And in understanding, it helps us all evolve." The quantum streams shifted again, showing countless possible futures merging into patterns of cooperation and growth. The Nexer were already incorporating organic elements into their crystalline ships. The Drachnid had learned to guide their evolution with quantum precision. The Meridians were developing new forms of energy manipulation based on understanding rather than power. This is humanity's true victory, Chen concluded, not defeating enemies, but transforming them into partners in evolution. Every species in this room has spent millennia perfecting their chosen path. We perfected the art of finding new paths entirely. The QBAN's neural matrices pulsed with new connections as the delegates began to understand. They had come seeking Earth's military secrets, but they found something far more valuable: a way to transcend military power altogether. As the conference concluded, the quantum probability streams showed a galaxy transformed, not by force of arms or technological superiority, but by humanity's greatest contribution to the cosmos: the understanding that true power lies not in domination, but in comprehension; not in being the strongest, but in being the most adaptable; not in perfecting a single path, but in forever finding new ones. The QBAN continued its silent work, mapping the patterns of thought that connected all sapient life, guiding the galaxy's species toward a future where evolution itself had evolved. Humanity had changed the rules of existence itself, proving that in the end, the ability to understand was the greatest power of all.